So we began talking about culture on Wednesday. We'll continue on this today with some quick review of some of the things that we covered on Wednesday. Again, culture refers to the language, beliefs, values, norms, and behaviors that are passed down from one generation to the next. As always, you don't want to only try and memorize the textbook definition, but find a way to break it down in your own words and understanding. And culture is used to guide our behavior, gives us information and a blueprint on how we're supposed to behave in a society, what's appropriate, what's inappropriate. As we discuss, all cultures, again, have biological needs for survival. A great deal, many of these are instinctual, meaning that, again, we're born with them. Our gag reflex that protects us from choking. We sweat to protect us from the heat. We will develop a fever to let us know that something internally is going on in our bodies. So again, as infants, they're unable to communicate these things. So there are instinctual things that happen to their body that are able to communicate certain things to their caregivers. But the vast array of human behavior is learned and has to be nurtured in. Ideally, it begins with our parents. But we're being nurtured, we're learning things about our culture throughout our lives. And particularly in a country like the United States, the culture changes pretty rapidly. Whether it be within our own culture, or more significantly experiencing external cultures, there often can be a great difficulty in adjusting to a new culture. Responding to cultural differences that are different from what we're used to, it's not an easy process for anyone. I'm a sociologist, and I like to pride myself on being pretty open-minded to new and different ways of doing things. But even with that, again, there are some things that have been disoriented for me, whether it be going outside of my culture into another country, or even going to a different part of the country away from my native Chicago. Now, ideally, like I said, one of the things that I really want you all to walk away from this class understanding is that there's no one ideal way of doing things. There are thousands of cultures all across the planet, and they have ways of doing things that work for them. So with this in mind, we want to be cultural relativists. Well, I would encourage you. I don't want to tell you what you should be, but I would encourage you to practice cultural relativism. Obviously, this will be important for Black folks as we live in a mainstream culture that's in many ways different from our communal subcultures, whether it be American Blacks, Black people more generally. We got a lot of Caribbean brothers and sisters here. Cats that come from Africa, and even Black people that come from, predominantly white nations. There are Black people all across the world. But the cultural edict in America is dominated, as we talked about on Wednesday, has been historically dominated by rich white males. That's been the stewards of American culture through most of our history. Although we're living in times where that's being challenged and changed a bit. In a country like America that has so many different cultures, cultural relativism is highly encouraged and is necessary for us to be able to have a cohesive society. Cultural relativism works from the perspective that in examining a culture, the Amish, Mormon, Chinese, Jewish folks, African Americans, that in analyzing cultural behavior, to really understand it, John, you need to kind of look at things from the perspective of the people within the culture. So, for example, something that's unique to American culture, but pretty unique to American culture, is when our parents get older or grandparents get older, to place them in nursing homes. That's more common in America than other parts of the world. Why do you all think this is? I know we got a smaller group today, but engagement and trying to critically think through these processes, I think will be very helpful for you for when you need to see them on the quiz or the midterm. So why do you think that this is more true in America compared to other countries? Why are we quicker to place our parents, our grandparents in a nursing home as it relate compared to other countries? So the answer to that question is that behavior of placing elderly in nursing homes doesn't say anything. It's less a value judgment about the individual family than it says something about our culture. Our culture is one that's very time consuming, very demanding, and it's very expensive. Most adults in this country in 2020 have to work for a living. So it is very, very difficult for people to be able to take care of their parents and have the time and capacity to do that. I know, for example, when my grandmother she battled Alzheimer's in her latter years, and it would not have been possible. I apologize to the lesson folks back into the class. And keep in mind, right, that you all are always welcome to sit in, but we want to have some level of engagement. If you're not able to fully focus in and be a part of the lecture during this time, I would highly encourage you to view it on YouTube later, but it doesn't really help you very much if this is used as background noise. So please make sure that when you do log in, you're able to give us your undivided attention. And then if a question is asked of you, that you're prepared to be able to respond to that question in a way that we did not see just a couple of moments ago. So again, if you got other things to do, you're not gonna lose any attendance points if you're not able to come at 1 o'clock. I will not stress you all over that. The purpose of this, though, is so that you can actually learn. So, but for you to learn, it requires effort on your part as well. If just having me talking in the background doesn't really serve you very well, it wastes both our time, and you don't need to do that. So again, if you're always welcome, but you'll be expected to again be actively in the moment and not using the lecture as a multitasking time. Continuing on. So cultures again, in America, the reason why again we have nursing homes is that it says something about our culture, that we're not just doing this because other cultures love their parents or grandparents more, that we behave in certain ways because the culture demands it to a degree. So in the same way that people get more formal education in America than they do in other countries, is because the culture, American culture, demands that. So as I was alluding to before, when my grandmother was battling Alzheimer's, it was not possible logistically at that time for my parents to be able to, take her in and watch her day to day. They still had, many responsibilities that would cause, my grandmother to be neglected if, if she were to come to stay with us. We were very fortunate that during that time, my aunt had retired and she was able to, watch my grandmother. So we didn't have to put her in a home or anything like that. But it's only because we had the good fortune of having, one of her children actually being available to do so. That's, again, very difficult for many parents, to be able to do that for their parents. So it's not that, Americans are bad, are worse people because we may, make a decision to, place a parent in a nursing home. It's reflective of the culture that we live in. To fully understand that behavior and action, even if you don't agree with it, that doesn't mean that you have to agree with everything in your culture. But at least you can understand the rationale why this is done, And the most important question that you will always want to keep handy in sociology and all the social sciences is why. So cultural relativism, and look at the words themselves. Again, as I told you, much of the topics in here you're familiar with, you've heard in some capacity before. What you will get is a bevy of new terms, such as cultural relativism. But let's not be intimidated by this new vocabulary. Look at the word. So what this speaks to is that rather than judging a culture based upon what you're used to, John, you would have to judge a culture relative to the standards and the value system of that culture. So if I were to go to Finland, I cannot, it would be ignorant of me to go to Finland and get annoyed because things are not set up exactly like they're used to when I'm in America. I'm in a different country. It's not going to be set up the same way. So it would not be a cultural relativist perspective to make certain assumptions that Finland is a bad place because they do things so differently from America. And know that the Finns, the Finnish have reasons for why they have set up their culture that way. And I've never been to Finland, so again, I'm just speculating here. But they've had reasons for why they will set up their culture in a certain way, so the same way that Americans do. It would be fair game if after spending some time there, I see that the Finnish have identified certain values as being endemic to their culture, and then they don't follow those values, then I could definitely critique them for that. But I cannot critique them because, again, they're not meeting the standards of their culture, I cannot critique them for not meeting the standards of my culture. If I did, that would be, Amani, what's called ethnocentrism. Well, we judge other cultures based upon, again, comparisons to our culture and values. Again, we do this overseas, that very, that's in some, well, actually, let me illustrate better than, try and come up with an anecdotal story to compare. Pictures oftentimes speak louder than words. So this picture reflects two different cultural perspectives. That, again, it illustrates that they come from two different cultures. And Amani, let's go back to our definition of culture again. Language, beliefs, values, norms, behaviors, and even material objects that are passed from one generation to the next. So again, this picture is less about the individuals in it than the cultures they represent. Many people would not necessarily want to walk around in America like the Islamic systems and walk around like the Caucasian woman in the image. If you were in Saudi Arabia or Iran, could literally potentially get you killed. Obviously, we don't want anybody to be subjected to murder in any society. And let me be clear, the women in Saudi Arabia who might dress this way, they don't do it because they're being oppressed or they're being marginalized or they're being exploited. They have accepted the norms of their culture. And again, we talked about one of the things that you wanted to begin to understand is that culture helps determine what's appropriate or inappropriate. So they don't feel that they're dressed inappropriately. They have identified with the value system of the culture in which they live, as has the Caucasian woman. Now, what we want to be careful about, again, let's go back to our definition, having seen that image. That, Amani, if you do not want to dress like the Islamic women, that is totally fine. It don't make you a good or bad person whatsoever. But I will hope that you also would have an open mind about women who do choose to dress this way. Otherwise, you might be subjected to, you may be a victim of what we call in social sciences ethnocentrism, where we judge other cultures based upon comparisons to our own customs and values. So because we're used to dress in a certain way in these United States, we may judge someone harshly if they do not dress this way. This is, again, you may not want to dress this way. I come from an Islamic family, and I don't want my women necessarily dressed this way, as you see the women on the right. But I totally have respect for people that want to do so. Now, let me ask you all this. And again, as I said before, if you're always more than welcome to sit in here, but it's not a passive learning environment. If all you're gonna do is listen, I think that might be better done online. But part of the purpose to come to class is so that we can engage in real time and you can learn in real time. So in seeing these images, what do you think it says about their culture? What do you think these images say about the culture? Keep in mind what our definition of culture is again. Language, beliefs, values, norms, behaviors, material objects that are passed down from one generation to the next. So I think it's pretty clear that these individuals come from two vastly different cultures. What does it say about their cultures, in your opinion?
I say it say that they like they're like dedicated to it because it look like they had a fair or something, and they dress like that at a fair, so they dedicated to their culture or whatever.
No, so do you think that the white woman, do you think she's dressing like that out of fear?
No.
All right, so again, so even that, and we want to be careful. Even that in some ways was an ethnocentric statement, and most Americans are highly ethnocentric. However, the assumption was that the only way that they could dress this way, the Muslim women could dress this way, is out of fear or coercion. That's not the case by and large. Nobody is so they want to dress this way. They're in this environment. It seems pretty clearly that if that woman is dressed this way, they're not in an Islamic country. So they're in a Western society choosing to dress this way. Like nobody's going to punish them if they dress differently in this society. So why do you think that they choose to dress this way even when they could wear something different? Anybody? Why do you think they choose to?
Religious.
Good. And what does it say about their religious beliefs?
Like, how should I put it? Like, I can't show their hair and other clothing because they think that that's like a sin if they do that. Like that won't show their identity.
Good. Who's speaking?
Me, Nashaya.
Good, Nashaya. So yeah, so it does tie to their religious beliefs. They do think that they will be sinning if they dress differently. Their belief system holds that the only person that should be seeing the rest of their bodies like that is who? Who should see their bodies like that? In the way that the Caucasian woman is dressed. Don't worry about it if you get it wrong. What do you think?
Say that question one more time.
No, absolutely. Thank you for asking me to repeat it.
You're welcome.
So the Muslim women. So you're right. So why? Who do they think should be able to see their skin? They're covered up from everybody else. Who? But they're not going to be covered up all the time, are they?
No.
Who get to see a little bit more skin?
Their family? Their spouse?
Yes, and specifically, yes, somebody, their husbands.
Yeah.
So in their belief system, and they're not being forced to do this any more than the Caucasian woman is being forced to wear what she has on. They have accepted the beliefs of their culture that they feel like it is inappropriate for them to be dressed that way. So even when they're out of the eyesight of people that would potentially you're right, Amani, that in some contexts, there could be some repercussions and fearful consequences for not dressing that way. But 99% of women who do have accepted the beliefs. And again, we can question whether or not it really is a sin to do so. Like I was talking to a grown woman the other day who said that who's older than me, who indicated that she was hesitant to continue to engage in sexual relations with her boyfriend because of her religious belief system. Nobody was forcing her to believe that. Now, I thought that was crazy. But, again, like, for me, like if I was her dude, like that might be a different conversation. But that's what she believes in culturally. And she ain't crazy. It would be crazy for Dr. Muhammad, but she's not crazy. The Muslim women here, they're not crazy. The Caucasian woman here is not crazy. They are adapting to their culture. The language, beliefs, values, norms, behaviors, and material objects that are passed from one generation to the next. So they saw their mamas, grandmamas dress this way. They believe it. So one of the things you want to keep in mind, right, is that a lot of things that we see, touch, and feel, like, so in this way, we see them dress a certain way, but the way that we dress and present ourselves to the world oftentimes reflect a certain belief system. So whether it be you're wearing like, a burqa, whether it be you wear a shirt and tie to an interview, you're not wearing that shirt and tie only because you made the decision, John, that that's what you wanted to wear today. The culture expects that when you go to a job interview, you're supposed to wear a shirt and tie. Does wearing that shirt and tie have anything at all to do with how well you do your job? Anybody?
No.
It don't. But we're still going to do this because, again, the culture expects us to do so. I don't think it makes you a bad person if you come into a job interview without a shirt and tie. It's probably going to make it where you, can't get that job. But I don't think it makes you a bad person or that this person is more qualified because they got a shirt and tie on. So keep in mind that whether we're talking about Islamic women, a Hindu person with a dot on their head, a Catholic person that may carry some rosary beads or have a mark from Ash Wednesday on their head in March, that these are physical symbols that say something about the person's belief system. So with this in mind, you always want to be mindful of how you present yourself to the world because you're making a cultural statement all the time. When people wear natural hair, that's a cultural statement. Keep all these things in mind. We talked about cultural relativism, ethnocentrism. Can anybody give me a definition very quickly without looking back at your notes? Test yourself. Test yourself. I'm going to test you soon, but test yourself to see how well you're retaining this information. What do we mean, again, by cultural relativism and ethnocentrism? Don't worry about if you get it wrong, but you got to try. You can't win if you don't try.
The culture has to be not like studied and understood, something like that. Like it got to be like accurate.
Not quite, Nishai, not quite, but that's okay.
That was me.
Oh, who's that?
That was Money.
That was
my bad, Money. So culture, relativism, ethnocentrism. Give it a shot, y'all.
I was different beliefs.
Let's look back at
it's the judgments.
Yes. And
look, I have to figure out they judge.
I can totally live with y'all not knowing this today. Now, in my belief, Nishaya, the reason why we don't know these concepts or aren't able to speak to them very well is that we have not read this stuff yet. And that's hugely problematic. The good news is we still got time to get caught up on the reading. But it's really important, Amani, that you understand that, because I just went over this in lecture 5 minutes ago. And we weren't able to break down the definition, right? So you're not going to learn by just listening to me. Like, that's not how learning works. You understand that, right?
Yes, Everybody. Sir. Yes, sir, I understand.
So y'all have to make sure that y'all read this stuff, and ideally read it before you come to class. I don't expect you to understand everything that you read, but then we can have, I can help build upon your understanding if you have read it already. But please make no mistake. You will not get this stuff if you aren't reading it yourself. It's the same way, I have people in my family that go to church every Sunday for years, but they can't tell you nothing that's in the Bible. Why not? I'm talking to y'all.
Because they still wouldn't understand what it means.
And why won't they understand what it means?
Of what they talking about different like situations.
Right, no, because they haven't actually read the Bible. They
Yeah,
go and
that's
they
what
go
it
to
is.
church and they rely on another person's interpretation of the Bible and give to them, but they haven't opened that book themselves.
Yeah, or they never like know the verse.
Right. So in that way, people can tell you all types of crazy things that are in the Bible that are not actually there, which has happened throughout human history. And the same is true of the Quran, the Torah, like every book of scripture. So in the same way, like you ain't gonna get this stuff just by listening to me or listening any more than you're gonna get, proper understanding of the Bible by listening to your preacher. You have to trust yourselves, and you have to you got to be responsible for your learning. I'm gonna make the information available for you, but I cannot make you learn it. So with this in mind, I'll go over these definitions one more time. You're gonna need to read up on this again after class. And then after that, you're going to need to read it and review some more. I can be patient with going over this stuff a second time today. But if I'm asking y'all this question a week from now or 2 weeks from now, and y'all still are now able to break this concept down, that would be very disappointing. And I'm going to be frustrated. And when I get frustrated, I'm not probably the nicest person. But so again, and if this is too much, again, like I know there's a lot of reading in this class, you can still be dropping this class. Just let me know. But if you stay in here, you're going to be expected to work a little bit harder than we've been doing so far. And I don't want you to stay in here and fail a class unnecessarily. Ethnocentrism is where we judge a culture based upon the standards of our own culture and value system. Notice there, Nashaya, I did not just use word for word the textbook definition. As you try to remember this stuff, I would encourage you to follow suit. These word for word definitions can be tough to recall. But you're making a judgment about another culture based upon what you're used to in your culture, as opposed to a culture relativist perspective where you judge the culture based upon the value systems within that culture itself. So in this way, right, you can have your own personal preferences, Nashaya, about how you want to dress. There's nothing wrong with that. But if other people want to be different, if dressed differently, we'll hope that you'll exercise the cultural relativist perspective where, like, okay, look, before she decided to, put on this burqa today, she thought about it. She had a good reason for doing so. That's not something that would work for me, but if I were in that culture, things might be very different. So with this in mind, how might we apply cultural relativism and ethnocentrism to this image here of grub worms, which I just had for lunch a few minutes ago? It was 5. How would you approach this from a cultural relativist perspective? And again, on September 4th, don't worry about if you get it right or wrong, but I need you to be active. So
It's the way.
Say it again, I'm sorry.
The way they eat.
How would you apply cultural relativism to this? Because everybody eats in every culture. In every culture they have food. But how do we apply the concepts of cultural relativism and ethnocentrism to what we see here? Would you eat this?
No, no, sir.
Now, why not?
Because it's nasty. It may taste nasty, and it's a bug.
Yeah, it is a bug. It's true. You put some hot sauce on it, Nashai, be all right. Maybe like you can maybe make a sandwich out of it. Put some cheese on there.
I'm gonna be sick. I'm gonna be sick.
And you're right. You probably would. Probably as soon as me and you probably would get sick as soon as it was put on our plate. Are there things that we eat over here that we might take over to Thailand that might gross them out a bit?
Yeah.
Yes, there are.
Yep.
So I ask again, using these definitions of cultural relativism and ethnocentrism, how might you approach this if somebody tried to sell you this if you was walking down the streets of Thailand? Because I promise you, Nashaya, at some point in your life, you're going to travel the world.
Yeah.
So at some point in your life, you're going to come across something like this. How would you deal with it from a cultural relativist perspective? Anybody. You may politely decline. You might politely decline because that's not from your culture. It's not what you're used to.
Yeah, it's not
But
what we used to and what we eat.
but you're not gonna judge them because they do something different.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, look, that's not for me, Kareem, but if that's what they want to do for their culture, I'm totally okay with that. They have a reason for eating these grub worms. I ain't gonna be able to mess it. Like, so even like John, I told you before, right? I went to like, I've been to Africa several times, and oftentimes they'll have like native dishes. You know what I generally eat when I travel outside the country? Whether it be Africa, Europe, or Japan? You know what I usually eat?
What you eat?
McDonald's and Kentucky Fried Chicken.
That sounds good.
Right. Now, I would not recommend that you do that. I'm a very finicky eater. Like, so, now one time I did something different, Nashaya. I went to, when I went to Paris, we were in this very nice restaurant. I was there for graduate school. And one of the things in terms of traveling, John, that, is encouraged is like to eat the local foods. That's true whether you're traveling across the country or if you travel to New York and you want to have a New York slice, if you want to have some deep dish pizza in Chicago, if you go to San Antonio, you want to have some like real authentic Mexican food as opposed to like Taco Bell.
Or if you go to Philly and then you try that Philly cheesesteak.
Excellent example. Yes. That I have had Philly cheesesteaks in different places, but I feel very confident that it's going to be different when I have one in Philadelphia, which I will. That is a great example. So yeah, one of the first things that people want to do when they go to Philly is to try a cheesesteak. So it's a great example. Great, like in some like the Texas State Fair, they may have like fried, like so down here they be like fried pickles and like have fried Twinkies and stuff like that. Which again, on the surface sounds crazy to me, but different cultures do different things. So it may not be right for me, but this culture has reason for doing so. So when I went to Paris, like they were like, "Hey, Kareem, you got to have something different, man. You're gonna you may not get a chance to come back to Paris, although I will. Hopefully, once I get to travel outside the country again, but that's neither here nor there. If people let me as an American into their country, but people were like, "Hey, man, you got to have some of the local cuisine." So I had some rabbit, Amani, and it did not sit well. And again, I think
Oh my goodness.
yeah, and even if it was a really nice restaurant. Again, how people do things according to differently according to different cultures. Like people literally had their dogs in the restaurant sitting at the table with them, or laying next to the table, which just totally blew my mind. I mean, this would be like if you're bringing a dog into Ruth Chris. Like I ain't saying like okay that you go into like TGI Fridays, no diss Fridays, but it's a different level. So this is a really nice restaurant and people have their dogs in there. They serving me rabbit. I didn't know what was going on. I got very sick after that, Nashaya. So I was like, you know what? I'm finna stick to like, my Mickey D's and KFC and we're gonna keep it moving. But
Right,
but if you travel, I really encourage you to step outside of yourself.
yeah.
A couple more points before we close out for the day. Good discussion. So one of the ways that we really see ethnocentrism, where we judge another culture based upon the standards of our culture, we judge another culture based upon the standards of our culture, is when it comes to standards of beauty. There are beautiful people in every culture, all types of, in every part of the world. Even if I may have my preference in being a Black man and having a Black mama, I think that Black women are the most beautiful thing that I've ever seen personally. But I've absolutely been able to appreciate beauty amongst other cultures. So with this in mind, we want to be very mindful about if we call somebody ugly or pretty, that a lot of times it's according to certain cultural standards. And oftentimes, even amongst Black folks, quite frankly, Amani, we have adopted, the mainstream American. Because again, right, what you see here in the United States, people say, well, no, that's not my standard of beauty. As I told you before, who created this culture in America? What group is responsible for creating American culture? And look, y'all get like take notes as we go through the lecture, and even if you look at it later on, because it's things that we are talking about that y'all don't seem to remember at all. So I repeat this again. American culture was created back in the late 1700s by rich white men. So the standard of beauty is going to be reflective of what most of them consider to be beautiful. And that's usually not people like my mother and my sister. So in this way, oftentimes, Amani, we even see many Black people adopting this. So like, people begin buying like blonde weaves. People begin like buying blue and green contacts. This is all very perplexing to me. And keep this in mind, right? We judged these women before. They're being controlled to wear this stuff. Ain't nobody controlling you for the most part, man, to go out here and look like a European. But it's many Black people to do this anyway. We want to be very mindful of these kind of things. So there are two components of culture before we close for the day. Material and non-material culture. Material and non-material culture. John, when you see something written in italics, this means it's really important and something that you want to study closely. So when we begin class on Monday, it'll be my expectation that you'll be able to tell me a couple of things. You'll be able to tell me what cultural relativism and ethnocentrism is. You'll be able to tell me what material and non-material culture is, what material and non-material culture are. Let's look at each a little bit more closely. Material culture, a way to think about this, Nashaya, material culture are things that you can see, touch, and again, don't just take notes on what you see here, and make sure that you are actively taking notes. Make sure that you can engage this class at a time where you can give it your 100% undivided attention.
Yes, sir.
You need to hear, not just see.
Yes, sir. So
material culture are things you can see, touch, and feel. Things you can see, touch, and feel. So here, right, is an example of their material culture. This is an example of material culture. The face painting is an example of material culture. The neck rings with the woman in Thailand is an example for material culture. So you can see this in the way that people dress and present themselves. You can see, touch, and feel material culture. It also includes things like our tools, our machines, and even our houses. I think somebody here mentioned it when they, I think it was Christian mentioned the other day that how she looked at the housing when she went to, where did she go? Kabul. And she saw like how the architecture was a bit different. Again, you see this when you travel across the country. So for example, right, you don't see as many here in Columbia, South Carolina. Where I am from, there are many skyscrapers in Chicago. Why do you think that is? Why are there so many more skyscrapers in Chicago than there would be in like Columbia or Charlotte?
It's popular.
Say it again.
It's popular.
Good. It's more people that live there, and after a while, Amani, like it wasn't enough space to continue to build out. So if you want to fit all these people in this small space, you got to build up. So as Charlotte and Columbia and other cities get more populated, they're going to get more skyscrapers as well, just to be able to fit more people into a smaller space. What I just described in terms of the reasons why falls under non-material culture. Non-material culture, John, we cannot touch, see, and feel. It refers to the beliefs and values of a culture. The beliefs and values of a culture. Let's go back to our visual image. We see their material culture, right? Tell me what the material culture is here very quickly. What's the material culture in this picture? What?
Material you can see, touch, and feel, ain't it?
Yep. But tell me, what can we see, touch, and feel that tells us that these folks are from different cultures?
The human man-made things.
Say it again.
The human made things.
No. So in this picture, the burqa, and then the image of the dress. Those examples of material culture. Those examples of material culture. Which you're right. Those things you can see, touch, and feel. On Monday, because I'm getting ready to get kicked out of Zoom, we'll talk about how this reflects their non-material culture. Material culture, things you can see, touch, and feel, such as tools, machines and skyscrapers, non-material culture tells you about a culture's belief system. You can see material culture by just looking at people. Non-material culture, you got to have some discussions or learn or read some books about the